This morning, what a joy it is to come together as church family to worship God and to be a part of this kingdom that God established on this earth. A life that we don't live that's beyond ordinary. It is extraordinary. We're not called to live ordinary lives. We're to live lives different than this world, lives of integrity and lives of honesty. It's definitely a different path, and it's a better path. Because when we start following that path of lies, life gets so complicated. But when we live honest lives, we don't have to worry about what we said. It's freeing. We can live genuine lives and dependable lives. And so we're in this study on the Sermon on the Mount where Jesus is teaching his followers what it looks like to live this life, to live in the kingdom, to be followers of his, to live this extraordinary life. And today we're going to be looking at Matthew 5:33 through 37, where he talks about vows or oaths, where he just says to simply let your yes be yes and your no, no. Yes and no. You know, sometimes we don't like the truth. You've probably heard this story. I've heard it told many times over the years in different formats, but here's one telling of it. A man received a call from his wife who was traveling in Europe, and she was about to come home, and she asked in the phone conversation, "How's the cat?" And he says, "He's dead." She said, "Oh, honey, don't tell me like that. You've just ruined my trip. You should have broke the news to me and a little bit more slowly." And he asked, "Well, what do you mean?" She said, "Well, you should have just said the cat's on the roof. And then when I got to Paris, you could have said, well, the cat's acting a little bit sluggish. And when I got to London, you could say, well, the cat's sick. And then when I got to New York, you could have said, well, the cat's at the vet's. And then when I got home, you could have said, the cat's dead." He thought about that for a while, and he'd never been exposed to any kind of protocol like that. But he wanted to learn. He says, okay, I'll do better next time. And so she said, "Well, by the way, how's Mom?" There was this pause, and he said, "She's on the roof." You know, sometimes we don't like the truth, and being honest gets a little too complicated for us to all figure out. In Jesus' day, the Jewish people had this complex system of vows and oaths. And many of the religious leaders wanted to make sure that they kept the right vows and only broke the ones that they could break. And so they had all these levels, and it got so complicated. And Jesus is saying being honest is not that complicated. He said, you are to be known as a person of your word. And truthfulness seems so rare in our world today that many of us feel like we need to end a sentence or a statement with, "I promise," or "this is true." From a very early age, we're taught by our peers ways that we can feel justified to break a promise. I mean, little children, as they're standing talking, they know that they can break a promise if their fingers are crossed behind their back. And so oftentimes when you were a child, did you not ask, "Let me see your fingers"? But you might have forgotten to look at their legs to make sure the legs weren't crossed. And make sure you look at their eyes too, because they could have crossed their eyes. And I don't know what all we did, but basically we're told if you crossed your fingers, that was a promise you could break. You were justified in not doing what you said. As one person called it, "Cross my heart and hope to die, cross my fingers and know I lie." You know, and so we knew we could lie. So there are things because of that, as children, we learned to say to make sure, no, we really mean it. I mean, there was the pinky promise, but also we learned to cross our hearts. And just to make sure, you know, that it was a minute, we could say, "Cross my heart and hope to die." And there was even another level to it, remember? "Cross my heart, hope to die, stick a needle in my eye." And so we had all these different complicated levels of how much do I really mean this? The point is, there's no need to cross our hearts if we never cross our fingers. And Jesus is just trying to say, let your yes be your yes, and no, no. That's how it is in kingdom living, because there is no substitute for personal integrity. That's how we are to live. And so in our text in Matthew chapter 5, verse 33, "Again, you've heard that it was said to the people long ago, 'Do not break your oath, but fulfill to the Lord the vows you have made.'" Now, in this reference, this time when Jesus says this, he's not necessarily referring to any specific scripture. There's a bunch of passages in Numbers and other places that he's referring to about oaths and vows. And he said, you've heard this said. I think it's pretty interesting that this text that we're looking at today follows the text we studied last week on divorce and how people were breaking their vows and feeling justified to do it. And if there was more integrity in our marriages, there would be less divorce. But that's not just true of our marriages. It's true for every relationship and all through life. So Jesus would go on to say in verse 34, "But I tell you, do not swear an oath at all, either by heaven, for it's God's throne, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. And do not swear by your head, for you cannot even make even one hair white or black." And so when Jesus is saying, this is the fourth time, you've heard it said, but I say to you, he's taking this traditional standard that they are following, and he's building it to a higher one. He's not trying to let us off the hook. He's setting the hook deeper and saying, if you're going to live in this kingdom, this is what it means. This is what integrity is all about. Integrity here is the issue. Oaths are no substitute for my personal integrity, because a liar's promise, a liar's vow is worthless. But when a person of integrity says yes or no, his words can be trusted. So personal integrity is the standard we're looking for here. Jesus would talk about this again later when he was talking to the Pharisees in Matthew 23, verses 16 through 22. He put it this way: "Woe to you blind guides! You say if anyone swears by the temple, it means nothing. But anyone who swears by the gold of the temple is bound by that oath. You blind fools, which is greater, the gold or the temple that makes the gold sacred? You also say if anyone swears by the altar, it means nothing. But anyone who swears by the gift on the altar is bound by that oath. You blind men, which is greater, the gift or the altar that makes the gift sacred? Therefore, anyone who swears by the altar swears by it and by everything on it. And anyone who swears by the temple swears by it and by the one who dwells in it. And anyone who swears by heaven swears by God's throne and by the one who sits on it." The rabbis were trying to help people understand what a vow meant and how important it was not to break it. And yet, in so doing, they're saying, well, here's the vows you can break and you can't. Basically, it works. This is an oversimplification. But they believed they weren't supposed to swear by God. But the closer your vow was to God, the higher it was, the more it had to be kept. So they'd swear by heaven. Or a little bit less than that would be earth. Or a little bit less than that might be the temple. And something a little bit less than that, or something in the temple. And something a little bit less than that by my own hair. I don't know. And Jesus is teaching, no. I mean, the heavens is God's throne. The earth is his footstool. It's not what's in the temple. It's the one who dwells in it. I mean, you swear by your hair. You can't change it from black to white permanently. But God made your hair. He made the earth. He made the heavens. And so it's all by God. It's in front of God. Personal integrity is the issue because what you're saying is made in the presence of God. And the central issue is God's presence and being honest with God. Instead, through all these little levels of promises, you've made it like a warranty with all the fine print, which makes it appear you never intend to do what you say anyway. You don't expect to hold it. But no oath should ever be made with a loophole. Not long after the time of Jesus walking on this earth, a sect of Jews called the Essenes took these words to an extreme. And in so doing, it was obvious that they were different than the world. There was a historian in that day and age that wrote often about that time. His name's Josephus. You've probably heard of him. Here's a translation of what he said about the Essenes. Any word of theirs has more force than an oath. Swearing they avoid, regarding it as worse than perjury. For they say that anyone who has not believed without an appeal to God stands condemned already. Well, may we be people who don't need to make oaths or swear when we make a vow, because we mean what we say. We have personal integrity. There is no need for an oath, because Jesus would go on to say, if there's a need for an oath, it implies the presence of evil. Verse 37 of Matthew 5. All you need to say is simply yes or no. Anything beyond this comes from the evil one. I mean, my yes needs to mean yes, and my no needs to mean no. And people can trust and believe what I say. But if we have to add words to an oath, it simply implies that what I'm saying can't be trusted. People need oaths only when telling a lie is a possibility. Keeping our promises builds trust. Swearing in order to deceive can only come from one source, and that's from Satan, the evil one. The evil one's simply a reference to the devil. You can go to John 8:44, and you see these unflattering words to the Pharisees. Jesus would say, you belong to your father, the devil, and you want to carry out your father's desires. He was a murderer from the beginning, not holding to the truth, for there's no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks his native language, for he is a liar and the father of lies. So when I speak untruth, I'm speaking Satan's language, his native language, and I cannot be trusted. I don't know about where you grew up as a child, and surely children today don't play this game, but down where I grew up, we used to play this simple game which was called open your mouth and close your eyes, and in it you'll have a big surprise. Hopefully that's only in Idabel. None of you know where you grew up, they do it too. So did you play? You know, my big sister, she comes up to me and says, open your mouth and close your eyes, and then you'll have a big surprise, and hot sauce, or... that's one game you only play once, except I didn't. I played it more than once. How foolish is that? Listen, when we are liars, when we trust this world, we're just trusting Satan. And yet we need to be different than that. We need to be people that can be trusted by others. James, the half-brother of Jesus, put it this way in James chapter 5, verse 12. Above all, my brothers and sisters, do not swear, not by heaven or by earth or by anything else. All you need to say is a simple yes or no. Otherwise, you'll be condemned. Well, James saw that lived out in the life of Jesus as a brother. And he's telling us that's how we need to live ourselves. Because he witnessed firsthand the power of honesty. And there is great power in honesty. Can you imagine growing up with Jesus as your brother? I mean, I have a little brother. Some of you have brothers and sisters. I don't know about girls and sisters, but the more boys in a family, it was just the more people to blame. My brother's my little brother, so I didn't do it. Kurt did it many times. Can you imagine doing that in Jesus' family? Mary would say, James, did you do that? I didn't do it. Joseph did it. Joseph said, I didn't do it. Jude did it. Simon said, I didn't do it. Jesus did it. Mary would say, Jesus, did you do that? No, ma'am. Who did it? James. James said, I didn't do it. Nah, never mind. Can you imagine growing up with Jesus? I hope you can imagine growing up like Jesus. And if you told the truth always, you were believed. What a way to live. Be like Jesus and no one can blame you. You tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Be like Jesus. Now, I'm not saying that's the easy way to live, because that truth-telling took Jesus to a cross. Isaiah 53, verse 9, when talking about Jesus and that cross, said, He had done nothing wrong, and He had never lied. I want to be like Jesus. It's not necessarily the easiest way, being honest, but there is power in honesty. And one of the reasons is because how God feels about dishonesty. Psalm 5:6, you destroy liars. The Lord hates those who kill and trick others. Proverbs 6, verse 16 and 17, the Lord hates a lying tongue. Proverbs 12:22, the Lord hates those who tell lies, but is pleased with those who keep their promises. You get the idea? When I am telling lies, I am speaking Satan's native language. But when I am honest, I'm being like God, because that's who God is. Hebrews 6:18, it is impossible for God to lie. And Titus 1:2, God cannot lie. Dishonesty is completely contrary to the character of God. There is power in being like God. There's power in being honest. And there's great danger if we don't. If we don't tell the truth, there's great danger. For many of us who got to grow up coming to church, we've heard the story of Ananias and Sapphira from kids. Maybe you've read it as well. It's found in Acts chapter 5. The church is brand new. I mean, in fact, it's so recent that many of the people that came to Pentecost and heard that first gospel message by Peter are still in town. And because of that, it's causing a little bit of financial stress on the church, on those that are gathered there. And so people are selling belongings, and some even selling some property to help provide for the needs and the food for those who are still in town, part of the church. A man named Barnabas goes and sells a piece of property and gives it to the apostle to help out with the food and the needs of those that are gathered there. Barnabas is, it's a wonderful gift. And people knew about it and they appreciated it. Barnabas would go on to become a leader in the early church, known as the son of encouragement. Made a big impact on Paul and so many others. What a powerful man. Well, the church saw what Barnabas gave, and there was a couple who must have seen it, Ananias and Sapphira, and they thought, wow, I would like for people to look at me like they look at Barnabas. Maybe we could be leaders in the church someday as well. And so, like Barnabas, they go and sell a piece of property. They keep half of it for themselves, and they give half of it to the apostles, which is no problem. It was theirs. They could do with their money whatever they wanted. Except they lied to the apostles. And that lie, because of that lie, they were struck dead. They died. Now, I've heard that story as long as I can remember. And so I think the power of that story I miss it at times. I mean, they died. Can you imagine what would have happened if Ananias and Sapphira had gotten away with that untruth, with that lie? And they, like Barnabas, had become leaders in that early church? That the church was built upon leaders who were dishonest and liars? But that didn't happen. They were struck dead. Don't miss the power of that. I guarantee you the people that day didn't miss it. In fact, in Acts 5, verse 11, it's maybe the understatement of the New Testament. Great fear seized the whole church and all who heard about these events. Wow. What I say matters. Lies matter. Now, I've heard people almost make light of this story and say, oh, I'm so thankful God doesn't strike people dead for lying today. Well, maybe He doesn't, and maybe He does. I don't mean take your life, but I've seen not the death of a body, but I sure have witnessed the death of a marriage because of untruths and falsehood that undermined its foundations. The death of a conscience, because it's always easy to tell that second lie. The death of a career, because of embezzlement or cheating and getting fired. When I speak falsehood, I'm speaking Satan's native language. And in his language, there's not a way to really say repentance and confession. I need to speak a different language. God calls us to be people whose yes means yes and no means no. Many years ago, Brenda and I were on a trip, and we were coming back to Oklahoma, and we were coming in from the north on I-35. And we stopped at a little fast food restaurant right there by I-35 to get something to eat. And as we're pulling into park at the fast food place, a big Suburban is backing out. And I watched it back out, and I said, surely it's going to stop, surely it's going to stop. And it didn't. It kept backing and backed into a black Mercedes. Well, the driver of it, and it hit it pretty hard. The driver put it in drive, and I thought, well, they'll get back in their parking spot, and they'll go inside, and they'll tell the people that they hit their car. Well, they did put the car in drive, and they drove off. I was going, I can't believe. They're just going to drive away? Well, I'm at least going to get their license plate so I can go in and tell the people, their license plate. And so I got it, and I went inside and I asked, does anybody drive a black Mercedes? And this sweet little couple say, yeah, we do. And I said, I'm so sorry. Somebody just backed into your car, and they pulled away. But I did get their license plate, and it was one of those vanity license plate, and it said this, YESLORD. Yes, Lord. Means yes. If you need to respond publicly, won't you come now as we stand together and sing?
When the trumpet of the Lord shall sound and time shall be